As someone who makes videos about queerness in Fire Emblem for a living, one of the biggest frustrations that I have with the modern game's approach is the existence of avatars and the emphasis on shipping, virtually eliminating the existence of gay and lesbian characters. I spoke about this at length in a previous video, but to summarize, the addition of and emphasis on dating sim aspects, as well as the core audience being heterosexuals, virtually guarantees that the playable cast of all future Fire Emblem games will be either bisexual or straight. It is possible that we get some queer monosexuals in future games. For example, the game Dragon Age 3 had a lesbian who the female avatar could romance, and a gay man who the male avatar could romance. But if I'm being honest, Intelligent Systems seems unlikely to do this. And one of the biggest reasons that I feel this way is the way that Fire Emblem Engage, the most recent game in the series, handled the character of Merrin. While Merrin's sexuality is never made explicit, her characterization throughout her supports heavily implies that she is a lesbian, and her personal skill is quite literally the lesbianism personal skill. And yet, despite this, her supports with male and female Aleer are identical, including the S support. Now, in most cases, Aleer's S supports are not explicitly romantic, and you could read either a platonic or romantic love into the Aleer Merrin support. However, the fact that it is identical regardless of Aleer's gender does not feel like the way they would have handled a monosexual character. Despite this, everything else in Merrin's portrayal makes me think that she is Fire Emblem's premier wolf girl furry lesbian. And since Pride Month just started, she feels like the prime candidate for a character analysis video. So let's dive in. I already brought up the Aleer support, so let's start with that one. It focuses around Merrin's obsession with rare critters and the fact that Aleer is, well, a dragon, and specifically a divine dragon. She begins by expressing interest in the Avatar character based on the fact that they are a divine dragon, and says that she wants to get to know more about the divine dragon species. However, what initially appears to be a set of friendly get-to-know-you questions is soon revealed to be research for a book that Merrin is writing about Aleer. This leads to tension between the two of them, and Aleer eventually calls Merrin out, saying that I'm not one of your critters. I'm a human, and I don't like being gawked at like an animal. Merrin apologizes for this, but in a move that confuses and astounds me, so does Aleer. In fact, Aleer apologizes twice, once immediately after calling Merrin out, and a second time at the start of their A support. She says that now that she understands Merrin's motivation is positive, she's going to help her write the book. And if you choose to give Merrin the bond ring, then the way they confess their love to each other is through entries in the book, which is kind of adorable. In case you can't tell, I'm not a huge fan of this support. It's not horrible. In fact, I think it does a good job establishing Merrin's character as someone who's enthusiastic but lacks social skills, especially when it comes to her autistic hyperfixation. My issue is I think she has a bad scene partner. This is something that comes up with a lot of Engage's characters, and I think it leads to the perception that they are by and large a flatter cast than they actually are, but the most frequent and easiest to get supports are the ones with Aleer, and they're usually the worst ones because Aleer just isn't a very good character. One of the recurring elements of Aleer's characterization is that they don't want to be treated like some sort of special divine being. Despite the fact that they are a religious figure within the land of Lithos, they just want their friends and companions to treat them like a human. And so it makes sense that they would be mad that Merrin is treating them like some sort of rare critter to be studied and documented. And yet, once they realize that Merrin is only doing it because she also views Aleer as some sort of divine being to be worshipped, this makes it okay for her to treat Aleer like they're not human? It just doesn't fit within Aleer's prior characterization, and moreover doesn't hold Merrin accountable for her character flaws. I think the writers just wanted to have one of the classic misunderstanding and both parties apologize supports, but it really doesn't work with the setup that they have, and it especially doesn't work with Aleer over-apologizing multiple times for justifiably getting upset at Merrin's behavior. That being said, there are still a few things we can learn about Merrin from this support. The first and most obvious is that she has an obsession with collecting and observing rare critters. The second is that she sometimes allows her enthusiasm to take the driver's seat, especially when it comes to said hyperfixation. This, in combination with her utter lack of social skills, can lead to situations where she accidentally offends the people that she likes and doesn't realize it. In short, Merrin is autistic. It's definitely a somewhat exaggerated portrayal of an autistic character a la Sheldon Cooper and the like, and personally I prefer the way that they handled autism with Lysithea, but speaking as an autistic lesbian who loves animals, it's nice that there's a character who shares those traits with me, and hopefully she's portrayed a little bit better in her other supports. And with that in mind, I'm going to look at the other support in which she interacts with a dragon, her Veil support. The support Merrin and Veil have begins in a similar manner to Merrin and O'Lear's support, with Merrin approaching and admiring Veil for being a fell dragon. However, rather than be offended, Veil is simply surprised. She's used to people disliking her specifically because of her fell dragon heritage. But Merrin actually likes this quality in Veil. Not only that, but she points out that the two of them are quite similar. They're both unusual, but at the end of the day they are still people, even if one of them is a dragon. And over the course of their support chain, Merrin's enthusiasm over dragons becomes contagious, which leads to Veil changing from being ashamed of being a dragon to taking pride in it. It's worth noting in this support chain that Veil also asks Merrin if the only reason Merrin is interested in Veil is Veil as a dragon. And Merrin responds by saying that no, she likes Veil as a person just as much as she likes Veil for being a dragon. Notably, Veil does not apologize for asking Merrin this question. And in my opinion, it works better this way because Merrin is able to acknowledge Veil's personhood instead of centering her dragonness. Merrin doesn't just find Veil cool because she's a dragon, she finds Veil cool because she likes Veil's personality. While Merrin's support with Veil helps Veil to appreciate a side of herself that she was ashamed of, her support with Citrine does the exact opposite. It begins with Citrine admiring Merrin, talking about how she seems cool and collected both on and off the battlefield. Merrin expresses that she's always cool because she doesn't want to show weaknesses. A knight needs to be strong to protect their liege, and showing any form of weakness puts their liege in danger. However, in their B support, Citrine catches Merrin playing with animals, and states that she feels that this is a side of Merrin she hasn't seen before. Merrin is acting like a clown rather than her cool, collected self. Merrin initially tries to cover, saying that she was just practicing for a play that she's going to be in, and this isn't the way that she acts normally. But in the A support, she confesses that that is a side of herself that she just doesn't like people to see, because she's ashamed and embarrassed of it. Again, she doesn't want to show weakness. But Citrine says that Merrin shouldn't be ashamed, and that she feels privileged to have seen the true side of Merrin, a different aspect of her than the one she presents on the battlefield. The two of them bond over this shared experience, and Citrine offers Merrin to come observe rare animals in the royal forest of Brodia. This is a rather simple support chain, but as an autistic person, I find it deeply relatable. There are some truly goofy things that I do in private that I'm kind of embarrassed to show in public. And when my wife catches me doing them, and not only doesn't judge me, but describes the behavior as a charming new side of me, it truly does feel special. The amount that Merrin's mood changed as soon as Citrine expressed that she accepts even the goofy parts of her friend is really sweet to see. Of course, in addition to masking, one of the other big reasons that Merrin wants to appeal tough and cool at all times is that she is a knight for Tamara, and she takes that duty extremely seriously. And we see this in her supports with Yunaka and Amber, where she practices sparring and gets into exchanges that escalate throughout her sparring matches. In the case of Amber, it's him tripping and falling and her being convinced that he is trying to get her guard down, whereas in reality he's just a goofball, very Greg-pilled. With Yunaka, Merrin practices monologuing because she thinks it makes her look cool, but Yunaka doesn't like that it gives her vulnerability on the battlefield. The two of them go back and forth about this until eventually Yunaka bribes Merrin into not monologuing with a dragon statue, and Merrin gives Yunaka a cool sword in exchange. Both of these show different aspects of what Merrin values about being cool and knightly, but if we want to get to her real motivation around being a knight in shining armor, we need to examine what I believe to be the most interesting supports that Merrin has to offer, those with Tamara and Panette. Merrin's support with Panette begins with them preparing for singing practice, when Panette lets slip that she overheard some people talking about how the three of them are the racket of Solm because their singing voices are so awful. Merrin is surprised and embarrassed by this, She used to be criticized for having a bad singing voice, but she thought she'd improved because Tamara said she was doing better. Both Panette and Merrin are afraid of how Tamara will react if she hears that people think that they are bad at singing, so they resolve to instead sing very quietly so nobody can hear them and therefore no one can criticize them. But this does not sit well with Merrin, who eventually decides that that is not the right thing for them to do. It's shameful to hide their voices, and instead they need to actively try to improve their singing skills. And by the A support, the two of them have gone to Tamara for tips and have acted upon the tips to significantly improve their singing prowess, or so they say. It's honestly hard to tell. I think part of the joke is that they are always bad at singing, and that's supposed to just be the way that it is. Tamara is unbothered by the fact that people seem bothered by her singing, so I don't see any reason why she would be bothered by the fact that they're bothered by her companions singing. They sort of march to the beat of their own drum. I will be honest, when I first watched the support, I was pretty disappointed by it. I felt that the resolution was going to be a more concrete confirmation that Tamara accepts their singing even though it is quote-unquote bad because it's good to her because she cares about the two of them. Instead, it reads like a much more linear, we're bad at singing, we practice singing, now we're good at singing. While adding the twist of them being bad at singing and Tamara being okay with that would be predictable, it also would have been, in my opinion, better than the kind of just boring progression of learning how to sing better in the most bland way possible. Instead, the big takeaway from this support is that both Panette and Merrin are highly devoted to Tamara. In fact, the way that they bond with each other is through their devotion to their liege. And while it could simply be that they take duty seriously, I don't think that's the case. Both of these characters have a devotion to Tamara that goes beyond simple lord and retainer. And in the case of Merrin, I feel that it is pretty explicitly romantic. Throughout the support chain, Merrin recounts the story of how she came into Tamara's service. She was next in line to be the matriarch of her home village, but she left because she rejected the role that society chose for her, instead wandering around a little bit aimlessly as a free spirit until she ran into Tamara, and was instantly smitten upon watching her take down a gang of bandits. Merrin followed Tamara around, fighting bandits with her until she was eventually knighted, but she thought that this was just Tamara playing a goof on her, since at the time she had no idea that she was serving an actual princess. This is, to my mind, the biggest piece of evidence that this devotion was not out of fealty, but instead out of legitimate love. Merrin played the role of knight in shining armor to Tamara's princess before she even realized that Tamara actually was a princess. And when Tamara did reveal that she was a member of the royal family, the two of them went back to Merrin's home village in order to ask Merrin's parents for their blessing. This feels like a pretty explicitly romantic tradition, mirroring the many cultures where couples will ask parents for their blessing before getting married. Tamara even says that Merrin's mother could tell their hearts were set on each other, and Merrin describes that moment as being when the clouds parted and filled her life with sunlight, so that she could wholly devote herself to Tamara's service. I don't know, sounds pretty frickin' gay to me. If we compare this to the support between Panette and Tamara, we see a different type of devotion from the red-headed berserker. Panette had an extremely rough and traumatic childhood, and she was lost in rage when she came across Tamara. Tamara directed that rage towards fighting bandits and keeping the people of Solm safe, and Panette feels that she was saved from the brink of chaos by the woman who is now her lord. The two of them do still have an incredibly close bond, but it is much closer to mentor and student than it is to romantic. Panette is thankful because Tamara helped put her on the right path. And while Tamara is thankful for Panette serving her, it's not in the same way that the equal exchange between Tamara and Merrin takes place. I think it would be accurate to say that Tamara cares about both of her retainers, but in very different ways. And I think this is where I'm going to end the video. There are a couple of Merrin supports that I didn't talk about. She has some goofy ones with Bunet misunderstanding about food and critters, and there's one with Rosada where they compete over cuteness versus coolness, but at the end of the day, I think the most important relationship in Merrin's life is Tamara. and so it feels appropriate to end on that relationship. Especially since it's a more serious support, and I'll be honest, I kind of prefer those to the goofy ones. I hope everyone's Pride Month is off to a good start, and you can look forward to more queer content from me in the upcoming weeks. Merrin was actually voted for from a list of topics by my patrons, so if you would like to be able to participate in future polls, there is a link below and you can influence the outcome on this channel, as well as get verbal thank yous in all of my videos. Speaking of which, thank you to Lilzabeth, Autumn Kelsey, Cynthia, Jamie Collins, Merrin Karen, Thick Molder, Danielle Kalaskis, Jagan is a Nest, Julie Kyoto, Arvis, Belle Wenska, Tailored Muffin, George Grenville the 7th PM, SUP, Caius Cole, Gabe the Green, Controlled Aegis, Joanna the Wrenchwitch, Juniper Jungby, Ginger, Psych, Mean Jojo, Len, Gameboo, Carosa, Fyrant, Smaz Ruby, Saxon, Seraphew58, Reflect, Marilyn McLean, Calamity Callie, and Queen Eliza. Your support is what allows me to spend 15 or so minutes talking about furry lesbians and getting paid for it. Like I said, there's a link below, but please only donate if you can afford to do so. Otherwise, liking, subscribing, sharing, all those fun YouTube stuffs help the channel grow. But regardless of what you choose to do, I hope you have a wonderful day. Stay safe, gamers.